The cowboy spent last dollar saving two Apache girls, and life changed forever. John, a tall and lean cowboy, guided his horse slowly along the narrow trail that wound through the canyon. He had been riding for hours, the rhythm of the horse's hooves almost hypnotic. The silence of the land was broken only by the occasional cry of a distant hawk or the sound of stones rolling down the cliffs. John had always preferred solitude. The long stretches of empty desert, the wide-open plains, and the quiet nights under the stars suited him. Life had taught him that relying on others often brought more trouble than comfort. Ranch work, cattle drives, and the endless chores of a cowboy had made him tough, resilient, and independent. Yet beneath his rough exterior, John carried a heart that often stirred when he saw people in need. He had learned to hide it, but it was there, quietly waiting for the right moment to act. That day, John's thoughts wandered to the work he had done earlier in the week. He had helped a neighbor repair a fence, delivered a message to a distant town, and even tended to a sick horse he had found near the creek. He wasn't rich, money had always been scarce, but he valued the feeling of helping others, of making life just a little easier for someone else. And though he had little, he carried with him a quiet pride in knowing he could face challenges that most people would shy away from. As the sun climbed higher, the heat pressed down on him. Sweat soaked through his shirt, sticking to his skin. His hat shaded his face, but it did little to stop the relentless sun. The trail was narrow, flanked on one side by sheer rock cliffs and on the other by a sudden drop into the dry riverbed below. Every step of his horse required attention, and John's eyes constantly scanned the path ahead. He had ridden this trail many times before, but the canyon always seemed to have its own surprises, loose rocks, hidden dips, or sudden gusts of wind that made the horse stumble. John was lost in thought when a sudden, sharp sound broke through the quiet. It was faint at first, almost like the wind playing tricks, but then he heard it again, a high, urgent cry, desperate and full of fear. He stopped his horse, ears straining, trying to locate the source. The sound echoed through the cliffs, bouncing off the rocks and making it hard to tell exactly where it came from. His heart quickened. Something or someone was in trouble. Without hesitation, John guided his horse toward the sound. As he rounded a bend, the cries became clearer. They were not the cries of an animal. They were human. He felt a knot in his stomach. In all his years on the trail, he had seen his share of accidents, injuries, and dangers, but the sound of real, desperate fear always struck a chord in him. His instincts told him to be careful, but his heart told him to act. He pushed the thought of danger aside. There was no choice. Someone needed help. The canyon opened up into a small clearing, and John's eyes widened at the sight before him. Two young girls, no older than 10 or 12, were trapped near a swollen stream that had formed from recent rains. The water rushed violently over rocks, turning into small, crashing waves that threatened to sweep them away. The girls clung to the edges of the stream, faces pale and wet with tears. Their clothes were soaked, mud streaking their arms and legs. They looked terrified, calling out for someone, anyone, to help them. John dismounted quickly, tying his horse to a nearby tree. His boots sank into the soft, wet earth as he approached the girls. "Hey, don't worry, I'm here to help," he called, keeping his voice calm but firm. The girls looked at him with wide, scared eyes, unsure whether to trust this stranger. John knelt a few feet away, showing them he was no threat. He carefully assessed the situation. The stream was too strong to cross on foot, and there were no safe rocks or branches to use as a bridge. He needed a plan. He noticed that the girls were clinging to the shallowest part of the bank, their small hands gripping the roots of a tree that leaned over the water. John's mind raced. He had to act fast. He removed his hat and wiped the sweat from his brow. He thought of the stories his father had told him about courage and doing the right thing even when it was hard. He remembered the countless times he had hesitated before helping others and how regret had followed. Not this time. He would not let fear stop him. John reached into his bag and pulled out a coil of rope. He tied one end around his waist and prepared to cross the rushing water, testing the edges with his boots. The current tugged at him, strong and relentless, but he moved steadily, keeping low and careful. The girls watched, hope mixing with fear in their eyes. John spoke to them softly. "Hold on tight, I've got you. Everything will be okay." His voice was steady, filled with a confidence he didn't fully feel but forced himself to show. Step by step, John navigated the dangerous water. The rocks were slippery, and the water tried to pull him down, but he pressed forward. When he finally reached the girls, he gently lifted the younger one, holding her close to keep her from being swept away. The older girl hesitated, fear gripping her, but John's calm voice reassured her. "I won't let anything happen to you. Just take my hand." With careful precision, he guided her out of the water, 1 foot at a time, until both girls were safely on the opposite bank. Once they were safe, John knelt down, checking to make sure they weren't injured. Their clothes were soaked, and their teeth chattered from the cold water, but they were alive. Relief washed over him, a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. The girls clung to him, trembling, and he wrapped his coat around them. "You're safe now. You're okay," he said softly. He looked up at the canyon walls, the wind rustling through the rocks, and for a moment he allowed himself to breathe. The girls, finally calming down, told John their story. They had been out collecting firewood when a sudden storm caused the stream to swell. Their small camp had been washed away, and they had no way to get back home. John listened intently, nodding as he absorbed every detail. He felt a surge of protectiveness. These girls were strangers, yet he knew he could not leave them here. He had nothing to spare in terms of money or provisions, but he had his skills, his courage, and his determination, and that was enough. John helped them gather what little they could salvage from the edge of the stream and guided them back toward the trail. Every step was careful, measured, and cautious. The girls, though exhausted, trusted him. They followed without question, holding his hands or gripping the hem of his coat. The canyon that had seemed endless and intimidating before now felt alive with a purpose. John realized that this moment, this act of helping, had awakened something in him. For the first time in a long while, he felt connected, needed, and alive. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the canyon in shades of gold and red, John led the girls to a small, safe clearing. The air was cooler, the shadows stretching long across the earth. He allowed himself a small smile, though he knew the journey was far from over. Saving the girls had been the first step, but getting them back to safety would require every ounce of his skill, patience, and courage. And yet, for the first time, John felt a spark of hope. Hope that this encounter, born from danger and fear, might change his life in ways he could never have imagined. That night, under a sky full of stars, John built a small fire and the girls huddled close, warm and safe for the first time in hours. The sound of the canyon at night, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of an owl, felt less lonely, more alive. John sat back, tired but fulfilled, knowing that his decision to act, to risk himself for strangers, had been the right one. Little did he know, this moment, this night, would mark the beginning of a life-changing journey, not just for the girls but for him as well. The night air was cool and quiet in the canyon, but sleep did not come easily. John sat by the small fire he had built, the flickering flames casting long shadows on the rocks. The two girls huddled close to him, shivering not only from the cold but from the lingering fear of the day's events. Their wide, fearful eyes reflected the firelight, and John could see the deep exhaustion etched into their young faces. He offered them pieces of dry bread he had packed for himself, and they accepted them silently, too nervous or too shocked to speak. John's mind was restless. He thought about the girls' situation and the dangers they had faced. The stream had been fierce, nearly carrying them away, and the canyon trails were treacherous even for someone experienced. He realized that getting them to safety would be far more difficult than he had first imagined. Supplies were scarce, and he had little money to buy food, blankets, or anything else they might need. The nearest town was many miles away, and the path there would not be easy. He also thought about the risks: wild animals, rough terrain, and sudden storms. But despite the obstacles, John knew he could not abandon them. Turning back was not an option. As the stars sparkled high above, John quietly asked the girls their names. The younger one, barely able to speak without hesitation, whispered, "Maya." The older one, with a slightly stronger voice, said, "Ayana." Their voices were soft and fragile, and hearing them say their names gave John a strange sense of hope. He realized that these two lives were now tied to his own, and that thought filled him with a responsibility he could not ignore. The next morning, John rose early, roused by the cold and the hunger gnawing at his stomach. The girls had slept uneasily, their small arms wrapped tightly around themselves. He carefully made breakfast from the little food he had, rationing it so it would last as long as possible. The quiet morning air was filled with the sound of birds and the rustle of leaves in the gentle wind. Despite the calmness around him, John felt a tension in his chest. Every step forward would be a test of courage, endurance, and careful planning. After breakfast, John helped the girls gather their belongings. Their small pack contained a few personal items, some scraps of clothing, and a blanket that had been their only comfort during the night. He tied everything carefully to his horse and helped the girls onto its back, making sure they were secure. Their journey would be long, and John knew that moving carefully was essential to their safety. He led the horse down the trail, constantly scanning for danger, both from the terrain and the elements. The girls clung to each other and to John as they moved. Maya, the younger one, often looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes, and John found himself instinctively offering reassuring words. "We'll get through this," he said. "You're safe with me. Just stay close and everything will be okay." His voice was steady, though inside he felt the weight of the responsibility pressing on him. He had never taken care of children before, but instinct and compassion guided him. Every decision, every careful step mattered. By midday, the sun was high and hot, beating down on the canyon. The girls were tired, and their feet ached from walking. John knew they could not go far without rest. He found a small shaded area near a dry creek bed and helped the girls sit down. They drank water from the stream cautiously, careful not to upset their stomachs after the day's stress. John checked their small cuts and scratches, cleaning them as best he could. He offered them more bread and some water he had carried in his canteen. As they rested, he watched the canyon walls, alert for any sign of danger. John thought about the difficult decisions he had to make. Supplies were running low, and he knew the girls could not survive without food and warmth for long. He also realized that he had little money to spare for any help along the way. The nearest town might have provisions, but it was far, and the journey would be perilous. Yet, despite the uncertainty, John refused to give up. He had committed himself to these girls, and nothing would change that. Every risk he took was worth ensuring their safety. As they continued their journey, John noticed how resilient the girls were, despite their fear. Yana, the older one, tried to encourage her sister, sharing what little she knew about keeping safe in the wild. She reminded Maya to stay close to John and follow his instructions carefully. Their bond was growing stronger, and John felt a quiet admiration for their courage. Even in fear, they showed strength, and that inspired him to push forward despite the fatigue and uncertainty weighing on him. By late afternoon, dark clouds began to gather in the sky. John knew a storm could arrive at any moment, and the canyon was no place to be caught in heavy rain. He quickly assessed the land around him, searching for a safe area to take shelter. Spotting a small rock overhang along the trail, he led the girls there. The overhang offered some protection from the wind and rain, though it was small and cramped. He carefully arranged their blankets and made sure they were as comfortable as possible. The girls shivered, but John stayed close, offering warmth and reassurance. As the first drops of rain began to fall, John reflected on the day's events. He had risked everything to help these girls, including his last money, but he did not regret it. There was a deep satisfaction in knowing he had done the right thing. The world could be harsh and unforgiving, but moments like this reminded him of the goodness that still existed. He realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. He had chosen to act, and that decision was changing the lives of everyone involved. The storm grew heavier, and John worked to keep the girls safe and dry. He shared stories to distract them from the rain, stories of his past adventures, tales of the land, and lessons he had learned as a cowboy. The girls listened intently, their fear slowly giving way to curiosity and wonder. For a moment, the canyon felt less threatening, and the storm seemed like a background to their shared experience. John felt a quiet joy in connecting with the girls, realizing that these moments of human connection were rare and precious. As night fell, the rain subsided, leaving the canyon damp and cool. John and the girls settled in for another night, the fire he built casting flickering light on the rocks. Maya had begun to relax, leaning against John as he told another story, and Ayana held her sister's hand, their bond stronger than ever. John felt a sense of purpose he had not known before. His life, which had been defined by solitude and survival, was now intertwined with these two young lives. Every decision, every step, and every sacrifice mattered in ways he had never experienced. The next morning brought clearer skies and a renewed sense of determination. John helped the girls onto the horse and guided them along the trail. They encountered challenges, steep hills, loose rocks, and patches of thick brush, but together they faced them. John taught the girls how to watch their footing, how to balance, and how to stay calm in difficult situations. The girls learned quickly, and their confidence grew with each passing mile. John watched with pride as they adapted to the challenges, realizing that courage and resilience could be nurtured even in the youngest hearts. By mid-afternoon, they reached a small settlement at the edge of the canyon. John knew they still had a long journey ahead, but this was a place where he could find help, food, and shelter for the girls. The townspeople greeted him with curiosity, noticing the dirt-streaked children and the tired but determined cowboy. John explained the situation briefly, careful not to ask for money, but simply requesting provisions and guidance. The townspeople, impressed by his bravery and compassion, offered supplies generously. Food, water, blankets, and fresh clothes were gathered for the girls, and John accepted only what was necessary, determined to preserve his dignity while ensuring their safety. That evening, after feeding and resting the girls, John felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had faced countless obstacles, risked his own well-being, and given everything he had to ensure the safety of two strangers. Yet the reward was not in money or recognition. It was in the trust of the girls, the warmth of their gratitude, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had done what was right. The experience had changed him already, teaching him lessons about courage, selflessness, and the unexpected rewards of kindness. As the sun set behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, John sat with the girls, watching them eat and laugh quietly together. Their smiles were small but genuine, and in that moment, John understood the true meaning of sacrifice. Life was unpredictable, often harsh, and sometimes unfair, but moments like this, moments of connection, courage, and compassion, made it all worthwhile. The journey ahead would be long and challenging, but John no longer felt alone. The girls, once strangers, had become a part of his story, and together they would face whatever lay ahead. The morning light filtered through the trees as John and the two girls, Maya and Ayana, prepared to continue their journey. After resting in the small settlement the day before, their bodies were a little stronger, but the road ahead was still long and filled with challenges. John checked their supplies carefully. The townspeople had been generous, offering food, blankets, and some clean water, but John knew it wouldn't last long if they didn't reach safety soon. He packed the essentials onto his horse and helped the girls mount it securely, making sure they were balanced and comfortable. As they rode through the canyon trail, the sound of birds filled the air, and the wind rustled gently through the trees. It was a peaceful morning, but John knew better than to let his guard down. The trail was narrow, and the canyon could be treacherous. Loose rocks, sudden drops, and hidden patches of mud could make a small mistake dangerous. He kept a watchful eye on the path ahead, guiding the horse carefully over each obstacle. Maya held tightly to his coat, and Ayana clutched her sister's hand. John offered quiet words of reassurance. "We'll take it slow," he said, "step by step, and we'll get there safely." By midday, they reached a steeper part of the trail where the canyon walls rose high above them. The heat from the sun reflected off the rocks, making the air shimmer. The girls were growing tired again, their small legs aching from hours of walking, even though the horse carried them for part of the way. John could feel his own muscles straining, but he pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that the girls' safety depended on him. He stopped occasionally to let them rest, offering food and water and speaking softly to keep their spirits up. As they continued, John spotted signs that the storm from the day before had caused damage further along the trail. Fallen branches, mudslides, and rocks blocked their path, forcing John to navigate carefully. He dismounted, leading the horse over the obstacles while helping the girls step safely over each hazard. It was slow work, and the sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the canyon. The girls were quiet, their fear from the previous days still lingering. John knew he needed to keep them calm. He told them stories about his past adventures, about the cattle drives, and about the wild horses he had once ridden. His voice was steady and confident, and gradually the girls' attention shifted from their fear to curiosity and wonder. By late afternoon, the trail became even more dangerous. The canyon narrowed, and the river that had caused so much trouble before flowed nearby, its waters still rushing from the storm. John knew that crossing it would be difficult, but there was no choice. He carefully searched for a safe spot where the current was slower and the rocks were stable. After a few minutes of studying the water, he found a narrow section where the girls could be helped across safely. He instructed them to hold on to each other and to trust him completely. John went first, testing each step carefully. The water was cold and swift, but his experience guided him. He extended a hand to Ayana as she stepped onto the slippery rocks, helping her maintain balance. Maya followed closely behind her sister, trembling but trusting John's guidance. The river tugged at them, but with patience and careful movement, they made it to the opposite bank. Exhausted but safe, the girls hugged John tightly, their gratitude shining through despite their fear. He smiled at them, his own exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "We're doing great," he said. "Just a little further and we'll be safe." As they continued their journey, John thought about the dangers they had faced so far and the risks that still lay ahead. He knew the journey would not be easy, but he also knew that giving up was not an option. The girls depended on him, and he would not fail them. His mind wandered to thoughts of home, family, and the life he had left behind. He realized that while he had spent much of his life alone, moments like these reminded him that human connection and courage were worth every risk. Evening approached, and the canyon began to glow with the colors of sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple, casting a magical light over the rugged terrain. John felt a sense of peace, but he also knew that nightfall would bring new challenges. Darkness in the canyon could hide dangers, wild animals, loose rocks, and sudden drops that could be deadly. He decided to set up camp early, finding a small, flat area near the river that offered some shelter from the wind. The girls were tired, but they helped as best as they could, carrying small supplies and assisting with the fire. As night fell, the stars appeared, twinkling brightly in the clear sky. The canyon, once intimidating and dangerous, now felt peaceful and alive with the sounds of nature. John sat by the fire with the girls, offering warmth and comfort. He wrapped a blanket around Maya and held Ayana close, speaking softly to calm their nerves. The girls listened quietly, their fear slowly giving way to trust. They knew that John would keep them safe, and that knowledge brought a sense of comfort they had not felt in days. During the night, John reflected on the journey so far. He had risked everything to save these two young lives, including his own safety and his last money. Yet he felt no regret. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that he had done what was right. Courage, he realized, was not about being fearless. It was about taking action despite fear. Each challenge they faced had tested his skills, his patience, and his determination, but he had never wavered. The girls' trust in him strengthened his resolve. The following morning, John rose early, determined to make as much progress as possible before the heat of the day. He helped the girls onto the horse, giving them water and food before setting out. The trail was still rough, with fallen trees, loose rocks, and uneven terrain. John carefully guided the horse, his eyes scanning for any sign of danger. The girls clung to him and each other, trusting his judgment completely. John felt a deep sense of responsibility and pride. He had never cared for anyone in this way before, and it was changing him. By midday, the sun blazed overhead, making the trail even more difficult to navigate. The girls were growing tired, and John knew they needed rest and nourishment. He found a shaded area and helped them dismount. They sat quietly, eating the food he had packed and drinking from his water supply. John encouraged them, telling them how strong they were and how well they had done so far. The girls listened, their confidence growing with each word. They began to smile, their fear gradually replaced with trust and hope. After a short rest, they continued. The canyon opened up into a wider valley, and the trail became easier to navigate. John could see the distant hills and knew that safety was getting closer. But he also knew that the journey was not over. There were still risks, wild animals, sudden storms, and the unpredictable nature of the land. He kept the girls close, guiding them with care and caution. Their trust in him was evident, and he felt a deep sense of responsibility to protect them at all costs. By late afternoon, John spotted a small settlement in the distance. It was modest, with a few buildings and farms, but it offered the promise of safety, food, and help. He quickened the pace slightly, guiding the horse and the girls toward the town. The girls' faces lit up with relief and excitement as they realized they were nearing safety. John felt a wave of satisfaction and hope. Their journey had been long and difficult, but they had made it this far together. As they entered the settlement, the townspeople noticed them immediately. Dirty, tired, and worn from the journey, John and the girls attracted attention. People approached, offering help, water, and food. John explained the situation, keeping his request simple and honest. The townspeople, impressed by his bravery and determination, provided the girls with fresh clothes, food, and blankets. John accepted only what was necessary, ensuring that the girls had everything they needed to recover from the journey. That evening, John sat with Maya and Ayana by a fire, watching them eat and rest. Their smiles were small but genuine, a sign that they were beginning to feel safe again. John reflected on the events of the past days. He had risked his last dollar, faced dangers on the trail, and endured exhaustion, but he had saved 2 lives. The experience had changed him, teaching him lessons about courage, selflessness, and the power of human connection. He realized that true wealth was not in money, but in the lives we touch and the trust we earn. As night fell over the settlement, John felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The journey was not yet over, but the hardest part was behind them. The girls were safe, and he had done everything in his power to protect them. He knew that this experience would stay with him forever, shaping his future and the way he viewed the world. By saving Maya and Ayana, he had not only changed their lives but had also discovered a new sense of purpose and meaning in his own life. After days of traveling through the rugged canyon and facing countless dangers, John finally led Maya and Ayana to a small, peaceful settlement at the edge of the Arizona Territory. The town was humble, with a few wooden houses, a general store, and a modest church at its center. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the sounds of daily life, children playing, carts rolling, and voices chatting, filled the air. The girls' faces, once pale and frightened, now reflected curiosity and relief. They had survived the storm, the river, and the long, exhausting journey, and for the first time they could rest knowing they were safe. John guided them to a small home on the outskirts of the town. It belonged to an Apache family who had been searching desperately for the girls. When the girls recognized their family, their faces lit up with joy and relief. Tears streamed down their cheeks as they ran into the arms of their parents. John stepped back, quietly observing the reunion, feeling a warmth in his heart that he had not known before. For all the danger and hardship, this moment made everything worth it. He had saved lives, and now he could see the happiness and gratitude in the eyes of those he had helped. The family, overwhelmed with gratitude, insisted that John stay with them for a meal. Inside their simple home, the girls' mother prepared food over a small fire while their father spoke with John about the perilous journey. He learned that the girls had been out collecting firewood when the sudden storm had caused the river to swell and sweep them away. The father's voice was filled with emotion, a mixture of worry and relief. John listened carefully, nodding as he recounted the events of the past few days, and the family's eyes widened in admiration at his courage and determination. During the meal, John noticed the strong bond between the family members. The girls' parents were loving and protective, yet they respected the independence and resilience of their daughters. John could see why Maya and Ayana had survived the journey. They had been raised with courage, respect, and a deep connection to their culture. He felt honored to have played a role in protecting them, and began to realize that the experience had changed him in ways he hadn't expected. It wasn't just the girls' lives that had been affected. His own heart and perspective had shifted. Over the next few days, John spent time with the family, learning about their traditions and way of life. He discovered how they lived in harmony with the land, respecting every tree, river, and animal. They taught him about their ceremonies, songs, and stories passed down through generations. John listened intently, fascinated by the wisdom and resilience of the Apache people. The girls, too, shared stories of their life before the storm, and John began to see them not just as children he had saved, but as young individuals with strength, intelligence, and dreams. During this time, John also began to reflect on his own life. For years, he had wandered alone, drifting from place to place, focusing on survival and work. He had rarely allowed himself to form connections, believing that solitude was safer and simpler. But now, surrounded by the warmth of the family, he realized how lonely life had been. The gratitude, trust, and affection of the girls and their parents stirred feelings in him that he had long ignored. He began to see that courage wasn't just about facing danger. It was also about opening one's heart and allowing oneself to care deeply for others. The girls quickly grew comfortable with John's presence. Maya, the younger one, would often hold his hand as they walked through the settlement, asking questions about the land, the animals, and the sky. Yana, more cautious at first, began to share her thoughts and dreams with him. John listened patiently, offering guidance and encouragement, while also learning from their perspectives. Their innocence and resilience reminded him of the simplicity and strength that life could offer when approached with honesty and courage. One afternoon, John accompanied the girls and their family to a nearby hill where the landscape stretched out in endless shades of brown, red, and green. From this vantage point, the beauty of the territory was breathtaking. John realized how much he had missed by wandering alone all these years. The connection to nature, the simple joys of sharing a moment with others, and the quiet strength that comes from protecting those we care about. The girls laughed as they explored, climbing rocks and pointing out distant rivers, while John watched, feeling a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. As the days passed, the bond between John and the family strengthened. They shared meals, stories, and quiet moments by the fire. John helped with chores, guided the girls through lessons on survival and respect for nature, and listened to the wisdom of the parents. In turn, they offered him a sense of belonging he had never known. John began to understand that life was richer when shared with others, when courage and compassion guided every decision, and when one could give selflessly without expecting anything in return. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and the sky turned golden, the family gathered around a small fire. John shared stories of his past adventures, while the parents told tales of the Apache ancestors. The girls listened with wide-eyed wonder, absorbing every word. It was a moment of connection that transcended fear, distance, and difference. John realized that he had become part of their story, just as they had become part of his. His act of bravery had not only saved 2 young lives, but had opened a door to a life filled with love, friendship, and purpose. The family insisted that John stay with them permanently, offering him a place in their home. At first, John hesitated, unsure if he was ready to settle down and form such deep bonds. But as he looked at Maya and Ayana, laughing and playing together, he felt a sense of responsibility and joy that he could not ignore. He realized that life was not meant to be spent in solitude, facing challenges alone. By helping the girls, he had discovered a new chapter in his own life, a chapter filled with connection, trust, and shared happiness. In the days that followed, John became an integral part of the family. He helped with farming, guided the girls in exploring the land safely, and learned the traditions and stories that had been passed down through generations. The girls looked up to him as a protector, a teacher, and a friend. Their parents treated him with respect and appreciation, recognizing the courage and selflessness that had brought them back together. John felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that his actions had created a lasting impact on these lives. As the weeks turned into months, John's life transformed in ways he could never have imagined. He had come to the settlement as a wandering cowboy, uncertain of what the future held, and now he was part of a family, deeply connected to people he cared about. Maya and Ayana thrived under his guidance, growing more confident and resilient each day. John felt a pride and fulfillment that he had never experienced before. He realized that life's greatest rewards were not measured in money or possessions, but in trust, love, and the bonds we form with others. One afternoon, John sat on the porch of the family's home, watching the girls play in the fields. The wind carried the scent of wildflowers and the distant river, and the sun cast a warm glow over the landscape. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the storm, the rushing river, the danger and fear, and understood that every challenge had shaped him. By risking everything to save Maya and Ayana, he had discovered a new life, one filled with hope, connection, and meaning. As night fell, John looked at the stars above, remembering the nights he had spent alone under the open sky. Those nights had taught him patience, courage, and resilience. But now, the stars seemed different. They reflected the warmth of friendship, the power of compassion, and the promise of a life shared with others. John knew that the bonds he had formed with the girls and their family were unbreakable. The journey had been difficult, but it had led him to a place of belonging, love, and purpose he had never thought possible. Through this experience, John realized a profound truth. Sometimes, life's greatest changes come from acts of courage and selflessness. By helping two young girls in desperate need, he had not only saved their lives but had transformed his own. The lessons he learned, the value of trust, the power of compassion, and the importance of connection, would guide him forever. John understood that true bravery was not just facing danger, but opening one's heart and choosing to make a difference, even when the cost was great. John's life, once defined by solitude and wandering, had now taken a new path. He was no longer a lone cowboy drifting through the harsh terrain of the Arizona Territory. He was a protector, a friend, and a beloved member of a family. The bond he shared with Maya, Ayanna, and their parents grew stronger with each passing day, rooted in trust, respect, and shared experiences. John knew that the journey that had begun with fear and uncertainty had led him to a place of fulfillment, purpose, and lasting happiness. And so, life in the settlement continued, peaceful and full of promise. John worked alongside the family, guiding the girls and learning from them in return. They celebrated small victories, shared stories by the fire, and marveled at the beauty of the land. John felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. He had spent his last dollar, faced unimaginable danger, and risked everything. Yet he had gained something far greater: trust, love, and a life forever changed. Time moved gently in the small settlement where John had found a new life. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, yet the memory of the harrowing journey that had brought Maya and Ayanna to safety was never far from his mind. Every morning, John rose with purpose, greeted by the laughter of the girls as they played in the fields. Their joy was a constant reminder of why he had risked everything, and it filled him with a deep sense of fulfillment he had never known before. He had come into their lives as a lone cowboy, carrying only courage and determination, but now he was an inseparable part of a family, bound by trust, respect, and love. Life had a rhythm here, one that was simple yet meaningful. John helped with the daily chores, guiding the girls as they learned to move through the world with confidence and care. He tended to the small garden behind the family home, repaired fences, and assisted in the few small business ventures the family maintained. Each task, though ordinary, held significance. Every action was a chance to teach the girls lessons in resilience, patience, and problem-solving. John discovered that his skills as a cowboy, patience, observation, quick decision-making, were valuable in more ways than he had ever imagined. The bond between John and the girls deepened with each passing day. Maya, once timid and fearful, now ran ahead on the trails, her laughter echoing across the valley. Ayanna, more thoughtful and observant, often paused to point out interesting plants or tracks of animals, sharing her knowledge with John as they explored together. John encouraged them to speak freely, to ask questions, and to trust their instincts. In return, he learned from them about curiosity, courage, and the resilience of the human spirit. Their energy and optimism became a guiding light in his life, teaching him lessons that no journey alone could ever have offered. Word of John's bravery had spread beyond the settlement. People in nearby towns spoke of the cowboy who had risked his last dollar to save two young lives. Though John never sought recognition, he could not escape the respect and admiration that grew around him. Visitors occasionally arrived, wanting to hear the story from John himself. He would tell it simply, emphasizing the courage and strength of the girls rather than his own actions. Yet he could not ignore the pride that swelled within him each time someone acknowledged his determination and selflessness. Over time, John noticed changes within himself that surprised him. His heart, once guarded and cautious, had opened to love, connection, and belonging. The solitude he had once cherished now felt empty and distant compared to the warmth of family and shared purpose. He realized that the journey to save Maya and Ayana had been more than an act of courage. It had been a transformative experience. By giving everything he had to protect others, he had gained something far more valuable than money, fame, or comfort. He had found a place where he truly belonged. The girl's parents, forever grateful, treated John as a son and a trusted guardian. They shared their knowledge of the land, their customs, and the lessons of their ancestors, welcoming him into their culture with open arms. John absorbed these teachings eagerly, understanding that life was richer when rooted in respect for nature, community, and heritage. He also began to contribute his own skills, guiding the family in practical ways, from repairing tools to managing livestock and navigating the wilderness. Together, they formed a unit built on trust, mutual respect, and shared experiences. One evening, as the sun painted the horizon with hues of orange and gold, John and the girls sat on a hill overlooking the settlement. Maya rested her head against his shoulder, while Ayana pointed toward distant mountains and rivers, imagining adventures yet to come. John listened to their chatter, smiling quietly. He realized that the courage he had shown in saving them had inspired courage in their hearts as well. The girls were learning that challenges could be faced with determination, that fear could be overcome, and that trust in others could bring safety and hope. In that moment, John understood that his journey had not ended with their rescue. It had only just begun. The seasons changed, and with them, the landscape around the settlement transformed. The dry, dusty trails became lush and green in spring, flowers blooming in the valleys and along the riverbanks. John taught the girls to observe the changes in nature, to understand the cycles of life, and to respect every living thing. He showed them how to gather water safely, how to care for animals, and how to make careful decisions when faced with challenges. In return, Maya and Ayana shared their laughter, questions, and insights, filling John's life with energy and hope. Together, they created memories that would last a lifetime. John also discovered the power of community. The settlement, once quiet and modest, became a place of support and cooperation. Neighbors helped one another, shared resources, and celebrated successes together. John contributed his skills wherever they were needed, earning the trust and admiration of the townspeople. Yet despite the recognition, he remained humble, always reminding himself that the greatest reward was not in praise but in the lives he had touched and the bonds he had formed. One winter evening, a storm swept through the settlement, bringing cold winds and heavy snow. The girls were nervous, huddling close to the fire, while John ensured that the home was safe and the supplies were secure. He thought back to the storm in the canyon, remembering how fragile life could be and how quickly circumstances could change. But now, unlike before, he was prepared. He had learned to face danger with calm and careful planning, and he had a support system, Maya, Ayana, and their family, who trusted him completely. Together, they weathered the storm, emerging stronger and more connected than ever. Through all these experiences, John came to understand the true meaning of bravery and sacrifice. Saving the girls had required him to give everything he had, but in doing so, he had gained a life richer than he had ever known. Courage, he realized, was not about fame or recognition. It was about action, compassion, and the willingness to put the needs of others above one's own comfort. John had demonstrated that selflessness could create ripples of positive change, impacting not only the lives he touched directly, but also the lives of everyone connected to them. As time passed, Maya and Ayana grew into confident, resilient young girls. They carried with them the lessons John had taught them: trust in others, courage in the face of danger, and the importance of helping those in need. The bond they shared with John remained strong, built on trust, love, and mutual respect. John watched with pride as they learned, explored, and grew, knowing that his actions had helped shape their futures. He felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not from recognition or reward, but from the knowledge that he had made a lasting difference. John's life, once defined by wandering and solitude, had been transformed completely. He had found purpose, belonging, and love in the most unexpected way. The settlement had become his home, the family his own, and the girls his inspiration. Every day was filled with challenges and joys, laughter and learning, growth and reflection. John understood that life was not about material wealth, but about the bonds we form, the lives we touch, and the courage we show when it matters most. Years later, people in the territory still spoke of the cowboy who had risked everything to save two young girls. John, however, never sought recognition. To him, the real reward was the life he had built, the family he had joined, and the lessons he had learned. His story became an example of bravery, selflessness, and the transformative power of compassion. Maya and Ayana carried his teachings with them, becoming strong, wise, and kind individuals, forever shaped by his courage and guidance. Even in his quiet moments, John reflected on the journey that had changed everything. He thought about the storm, the rushing river, and the canyon trails that had tested him to the limits. He remembered the fear and determination, the exhaustion and hope, and realized that every challenge had led to something greater than he could have imagined. By risking his last dollar and putting himself in danger to save two lives, he had unlocked a life filled with love, trust, and meaning. John often sat under the stars, just as he had on the first night he met Maya and Ayana. But now, the sky felt different. The stars seemed to shine brighter, reflecting the warmth of family, the strength of friendship, and the power of human connection. He understood that true heroism was not about glory or fame. It was about the willingness to act, to care, and to create positive change in the lives of others. His courage had saved two lives, but it had also transformed his own, giving him a purpose and fulfillment he had never known in years of wandering alone. In the years that followed, John continued to live with the family, guiding the girls and helping the community. He shared stories of his experiences, teaching the values of courage, compassion, and resilience. The girls grew into strong, capable young women, carrying with them the lessons of bravery and selflessness that John had embodied. The bond they shared remained unbroken, a testament to the power of trust and the impact of selfless action. The life John had built was a life of meaning. He had found family, friendship, and belonging through his courage and compassion. The journey that began with danger, fear, and uncertainty had led him to a place of love, respect, and fulfillment. By saving Maya and Ayana, John had not only changed their lives but had transformed his own. His story became a legacy of hope, courage, and the extraordinary power of selflessness, a reminder that even the smallest acts of bravery can create a life forever changed. And so, John lived the rest of his days with purpose and peace, knowing that the choice he had made to risk everything for two young girls had given him the greatest reward imaginable. He had discovered that life's true value lies not in wealth or fame, but in the love, trust, and courage we share with one another. By saving Maya and Ayana, John had ensured that their lives and his own would never be the same again. The cowboy who had once wandered alone had found his home, his family, and a life forever enriched by the power of compassion.